Hello and welcome to our next module. In this module, we'll be reviewing the Virginia Plan. Now let's just recap for a second. In the last module, we talked about uh, all the background information for the Constitutional Convention. A couple of items, if you remember. One, it wasn't called the Constitutional Convention before. It was called the Federal Convention because the express purpose of this convention was to revise the articles and not to overhaul them. And again, we know how the movie ends, but again, the purpose was to revise. Now, when the delegates showed up at the convention, again, remember only 9 of the 13 states were there on the first day. Uh, the Virginia Plan it kicked off the whole discussions of the convention. All right. Now, the Virginia Plan was drafted by Madison and presented by Randolph. Now, James Madison, very interesting person. He's usually referred to as the father of our Constitution. He was a scholar, and he really did his homework ahead of this convention. A good friend of his, Jefferson, had lent him a lot of books. Jefferson at this time was over in France, acting as a foreign dignitary. But he lent Madison some books to do just a lot of research. And one of the things that Madison really wanted to peel back was, why did democracies fail? Now, Madison, in addition to what his master plan was going into the convention, he had served in the Virginia state legislature, and he had also served in the Congress of the Articles of Confederation. And he had seen all the warts and flaws that were in those two legislative bodies. But again, Madison had a plan for what he wanted to pull off here in the convention. And again, the Virginia Plan kicked off all the discussions in the convention. Now, one of the first things that was proposed out of the Virginia Plan, when we look at it, bicameral legislature. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, there was a Congress, but it was unicameral, which just basically means one body. Now, in this case, what you're starting to see is that with the Virginia Plan, it has a lot of the same elements that we see today in our government. And so what you have here is proposal, bicameral legislature, two houses, with the lower is elected and the upper is selected by the lower. So if you want to put that into some sort of conventional sense, that'd be like us voting for members of the House of Representatives, us collectively, but then the House of Representatives turn around and then selecting the members of the Senate. All right. Now, under this proposal, both houses would be based on proportional representation. So a state like Virginia, a lot of people, large population, proportionally it would have greater representation than, say, a Rhode Island. All right. So again, this is going to be one of those little sticking points throughout the conversation through the convention, as far as sovereignty, who was going to be affected to what degree when they come to some sort of compromise. Now, these next two items, as a part of the proposal of the Virginia Plan, are interesting in that with the Articles of Confederation, we discussed in the previous module that the states wanted to avoid, like the plague, anything that could jeopardize the new sovereignty that each of the new states had secured. In this case, the Virginia Plan was proposing to establish an executive and a national judiciary. Along these lines, the Virginia Plan was proposing a strong central government. Okay, let's kind of cut to the chase here. What it's really talking about with this point is that this whole 100% sovereignty of each individual state would be no more. That you would have, to some degree or another, some sovereignty in the national government. All right. Now, here's one little point here: power of the citizens as well as the states. This is something that, when you look at it and think about it, it's a subtle item, but it makes sense. Now, with this, you start thinking about, well, is that this national government, who's going to be obliged to it? I think we said in a previous module, if I'm walking the streets of Boston in 1770, how do I define myself? I don't think of myself as an American. I think of myself as a British citizen. If I'm walking the streets of, say, Philadelphia in 1785, after the Revolutionary War, I don't think of myself necessarily as American. I think of myself as a citizen of the state of Pennsylvania who happens to be associated with 12 other governments in this Confederacy. All right. Now, let's get back to the basic purpose of the convention again. The purpose of the convention was to what? Revise the articles. Do we see anything in what we've discussed thus far that will revise the articles? Basically guts it. Now, over the years in my classes, I've kind of thrown this out there that, what if, I've had a long week at work. It comes to a Friday night, and I plan on going home, holding the couch down, finding a game on television, and just relaxing. All right. Then I show up home, and my wife says, "You're taking me to the Capitol Grill." Now, first of all, everybody needs to know I'm cheap to a fault, and that layered with the thought that my intent in coming home is to, again, hold the couch down. Now, let's kind of pause that story just for a second. I like to ask my students, okay, what if you were a delegate of the state of New Jersey and you show up to the convention with the express purpose of revising the articles, and this is the first point of business that you see, something completely out of left field? What do you do? What can you do? Right? Well, you represent a sovereign nation, right? You could walk out. Now, let's get back to my story about me and my wife for a second. So, my wife says, "You're taking me to the Capitol Grill." Well, what are my choices? Now, I gotta tell you, it's not the smartest thing in the world to walk out on my wife. All right, I would not do that in any way, shape, or form. But I'd probably be more inclined to say, what about Chili's? Okay, now here's the subtlety in all that. As soon as I engage in the dialogue, as far as what's being proposed, any thoughts of my original purpose are poof, gone. Any thoughts of me sitting down, watching the game, holding the couch down, long gone. So let's go back to when I asked one of my students, well, if you represent the state of Virginia, or I'm sorry, the state of New Jersey, and you're presented with this, what could you do? You could walk out. You represent a sovereign nation. But like the story with me and my wife, as soon as you sit and actually take this in consideration, any thoughts of the Articles of Confederation surviving are over. Not going to happen. All right, and so that's exactly what happened in this case. So these states representing sovereign nations showed up with the express purpose of revising the articles, but the first course of business was really a completely new system that was being proposed. And as soon as the states remained to start discussing this, any thoughts of the Articles of Confederation surviving? Long gone. Okay. With that, that's the end of this module, and we will pick it up with the next one. Thank you.